was for focus on coronavirus and its impact on the budget, but particularly the Labor Party targeting the economic management of the government prior to this health crisis. Have a look.
Does the Prime Minister stand by his 2019 statement that he, and I quote, brought the budget back to surplus next year, end quote?
Our government has been dealing with the financial wreckage that was left to us by the Labor Party, Mr Speaker, by the financial wreckage of the Labor Party. And I remember well when Obi Swan came to the dispatch box, Mr Speaker, and the pad one over there, Mr Speaker, his pad one was priming him up as he came into the chamber, and he talked about those 4 surpluses, Mr Speaker. He may recall, the pad one, Mr Speaker, that the GFC had passed by that time.
Scott Morrison there referring to Wayne Swan and Jim Chalmers, the current Shadow Treasurer, was his long-time Chief of Staff, so suggesting that their claimed surpluses, which of course didn't eventuate, he's pointing the finger at them, as they are saying right now, your promise of back to black is not going to eventuate this year.
And that's fair enough too. I mean, that's fair criticism. Jim Chalmers was Chief of Staff, very important position in the government of the Treasurer at the time, Wayne Swan, and yes, they promised surpluses, we didn't get them. It just seems like an endless series of promises by governments of surpluses and not delivering. Here it's going to happen again. You'd have to say the coronavirus is one of the best excuses we've seen for a while, but it's going to happen again. If the government does project surpluses in the out years on budget night in May, Kieran, I think we'd be right to be extremely sceptical and really saying, isn't there a bunch of heroic assumptions here? Because this coronavirus crisis looks like it's going to have an impact for some time. The kind of strange shots of people stockpiling on goods makes you wonder if there might be a bit of a boost in the retail sales somehow out of this. But even being at Sydney Airport this morning, and I reckon it was about half full from what it normally is, the tourism sector's feeling it, the education sector's feeling it. You know, that's on top of the fires and the effect on local tourism. It really is all bad news economically for the government at the moment.
There was one element in that question time, Andrew, that jumped out at me when the Treasurer spoke about the 2 decades of continuous economic growth. If they were to lose that mantle, for example, if there were to be a recession, that would be a very difficult thing to manage in a political sense, as well as economic, of course, but in a political sense, after 2 decades of continuous economic growth, there are many people in the workforce who weren't alive the last time we had a recession.
Yeah, don't we know it? I mean, we were probably, you know, just sort of starting out in work at that time, and it was a scary time, a recession. But there's no doubt after recessions, governments tend to lose office because people want someone to punish. So I don't think Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg will be as focused on a surplus as opposed to a small deficit as they will be on avoiding a recession. That should be and will be a big focus for them. And I mean, we saw it in 75 after the oil crisis, we saw it in 83, 96 wasn't long after a recession. That's when governments used to change in Australia. We've been extraordinarily lucky to have the growth that we have and just have to hope this coronavirus doesn't put an end to that.
Indeed, we sure do. You saw from Labor a big chunk of their questions, almost their second half of questions in the parliamentary question time was about the economy, was about the economic parameters prior to the coronavirus. So like the coalition made Labor own their deficits during the global financial crisis, Labor is seeking to make the coalition now own their budgetary performance in the face of this global health crisis.
And that'll be a tough sell for Labor, because one of the reasons that Labor languishes at 33-34% primary vote is people do not believe they are the better economic managers. So it is a hard argument whether there's any merit in the fact the economy was slightly south before that or not. It will be a difficult argument to pull off, but they've shown they are going to pursue that, as you say, Kieran.